A closet is a small, dark place. Now imagine that closet is the entire world of heavy metal, and you are trapped inside it. Many of rock's biggest names felt that way. We're opening the door on 20 musicians who hid their true identities. The first one on our list is considered the metal god himself, and his story is unbelievable. 1. Rob Halford. When you think of heavy metal, you think of Judas Priest, and when you think of Judas Priest, you think of Rob Halford. He is the metal god. This man literally created the look of heavy metal. Believe it or not, the whole leather and studs image? That came from Halford. He brought it into the band from his own private life, and it became the uniform for metalheads everywhere. He would ride a Harley motorcycle on stage, dressed head to toe in black leather. It was the ultimate tough guy look. But here's the kicker. The whole time, Rob Halford was a gay man. He was terrified that if the fans, especially in the 70s and 80s, ever found out, it would be the end of Judas Priest. He lived in fear for over 2 decades. He battled with a heavy lifestyle and feelings of being alone. It wasn't until 1998, during an interview on MTV, that he finally told the world. He was in his late 40s. To put it mildly, the metal world was stunned. But what happened was amazing. The fans, they didn't care. They just wanted their metal god back. Halford may be the ultimate metal god, but our next star wasn't just a god of rock. He was the undisputed queen of the entire stage. 2. Freddie Mercury. Everyone knows Queen. Even if you don't like rock, you know Bohemian Rhapsody. And We Will Rock You. And at the front of it all was Freddie Mercury. Freddie was probably the greatest frontman who ever lived. He was flashy, loud, and had a stage presence that could fill a stadium of 100,000 people. He was pure magic. But what many people don't know is that the public Freddie was a character. The real man, born Farrokh Bull Sara, was actually very shy, and he was hiding a lot. For his entire career, Freddie kept his private life locked away. He had a very deep relationship with a woman, Mary Austin, who he called his common-law wife, and left his house too. But he was also in relationships with men. This was an open secret among his friends, but was never ever discussed in public. He feared that the truth would tarnish the band's image. He never officially came out. It was only his tragic passing from an AIDS-related illness in 1991 that confirmed what many had guessed. Freddie hid his truth in plain sight, using his flamboyant style as a mask. But what if you were hiding in a community that told you your very feelings were a sin? 3. Doug Pinnick. You might know the band King's X. They are a beloved progressive metal band. They mix heavy, sludgy riffs with amazing 3-part harmonies. They were a huge influence on bands like Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam. But they also had a very specific audience. You see, King's X was marketed heavily as a Christian metal band. Their shows were safe spaces for religious rock fans, and their lyrics were full of spiritual themes. At the front of this band was the singer and bass player, Doug Pinnick. He had one of the most soulful voices in all of rock. But he was living with a terrible secret. Doug was gay. He spent decades in a community that he believed would instantly reject him if they knew the truth. He tried everything to change himself, but it was just who he was. Finally, in 1998, the same year as Rob Halford, Doug Pinnick came out in an interview. The fallout was exactly what he feared. The Christian music industry dropped him. Record stores pulled King's X albums from the shelves. He lost many of his so-called friends. It was a brutal experience. But Doug, to his credit, never backed down. Doug Pinnick's story is about a clash with faith. Our next story is about a clash with a scene that is even darker and more extreme: death metal. 4. Paul Masvidal. Let's go deep into the metal underground. In the late 80s and early 90s, The most extreme music in the world was Florida death metal, and two of the most respected musicians in that scene were Paul Masvidal and Sean Reinert. They were the guitarist and drummer for the legendary band Death on their groundbreaking 1991 album, Human. They were technical wizards. After that, they formed their own band, a prog metal masterpiece called Cynic. The thing nobody tells you is that this scene was incredibly macho. It was all about being the most brutal and extreme. But Paul Masvidal was hiding something. He was gay. He had known since he was a kid, but he buried it deep down. He felt that if anyone in the death metal world found out, it would be a disaster. He even tried to date women to keep up the appearance. He was so deep in the closet, he couldn't even admit it to himself, let alone his bandmates. It wasn't until 2014, more than 20 years later, that he was ready to tell the truth. But he didn't do it alone. He came out alongside his oldest friend and bandmate, who had been hiding the exact same secret. 5. Sean Reinert. Sean Reinert was the other half of this amazing musical duo. He was the drummer for Death and Cynic, and his playing style changed drumming forever. He was a powerhouse. He and Paul Masvidal had been friends since they were kids. They learned to play music together, they formed bands together, and they toured the world together. And, as it turns out, they were both gay. For all those years, they both lived in separate, private closets. They were in the same band, on the same tour bus, living the same life, but they were too afraid to even tell each other. Imagine the pressure of that. They were in one of the most aggressive, male-dominated genres on Earth, and they felt completely alone. It wasn't until they were both adults, long after the band's first breakup, that they finally had that conversation. In 2014, they decided to come out publicly, together in a magazine article. It was a landmark moment for extreme metal. Sadly, Sean Reinert passed away suddenly in 2020. But his legacy as a groundbreaking drummer and as a brave man is set in stone. Two bandmates hiding the same secret is amazing. But our next musician was in a huge band where his coming out was almost an accident. 6. Roddy Bottum. In the early 90s, one of the weirdest and coolest bands on MTV was Faith No More. They mixed metal, funk, rap, and rock. Their song Epic was a massive hit. The band was led by the wild antics of singer Mike Patton, but the musical mastermind on the keyboard was Roddy Bottum. He gave the band their unique, atmospheric sound. Roddy was gay, and his bandmates knew. It wasn't a big secret within the group. But to the public, that was a different story. The metal world in 1993 was not a welcoming place. Here's the wild part. His coming out wasn't some big planned event. He was doing an interview for a magazine, and the reporter just happened to be gay. They were just talking, and Roddy casually mentioned his boyfriend. The reporter was shocked and asked, "Are you coming out?" Roddy just said, yeah, it wasn't a big deal to him. But when the article was printed, it was a huge deal. He became one of the very first mainstream metal-adjacent musicians to be openly out. It was a brave move that paved the way for many others. Roddy Bottum's story was surprisingly casual. Our next story is the exact opposite. It comes from the most extreme and frightening music scene of all, Norwegian black metal. 7. Gal. Okay, now we go to a place of pure darkness. Norwegian black metal in the 1990s was famous for two things: fast, screaming music and truly shocking crime. This was a scene known for church burnings and violence. It was the most evil and macho music scene ever, and one of its most terrifying figures was the singer known as Gaul, the frontman for the band Gorgoroth. Gaul was the real deal. He was a huge, intimidating man with a reputation for being intense and dangerous. He was even put in prison for violence. He was, to put it mildly, the last person on Earth you would expect to have a secret. Then, in 2008, the impossible happened. Gall came out as gay. The black metal scene's collective jaw hit the floor. This man, who was the face of one of the most extreme bands in the world, was in a relationship with a man. He didn't make a big deal about it. He just said, "I am what I am." The wow factor here is the sheer bravery. In a scene that was openly hostile, this terrifying frontman just admitted his truth. Gall shocked the black metal world by coming out as a gay man. Our next star shocked the 90s metal world by coming out as a trans woman. 8. Mina Caputo. In the mid-90s, the New York band Life of Agony was a huge force in the alternative metal scene. Their music was heavy, dark, and full of emotion. The voice of that pain was the band's singer, known then as Keith Caputo. He had a powerful, tough guy voice, and the band's concerts were intense, physical events. Life of Agony toured with metal gods like Metallica and Ozzy Osbourne. But Keith was struggling in a way no one understood. Since childhood, Keith had felt a deep disconnect with being a male. This feeling of being in the wrong body, known as gender dysphoria, was a constant private battle. But how could a tough metal singer from Brooklyn ever talk about that? It seemed impossible. So the singer lived with this secret for decades. Finally, in 2011, the singer made a public announcement. Keith was transitioning and would now be known as Mina Caputo. It was a massive shock to the hard rock community. But Mina was finally able to be her true self. Today, she still fronts Life of Agony, her voice as powerful as ever. Mina's journey was a long and difficult one. Our next musician also came out as trans, and her story became a cover story for Rolling Stone magazine. 9. Laura Jane Grace. The band Against Me started as a raw, angry punk band, but as they grew, their sound got bigger and more rock-focused, sharing stages with massive metal bands. The heart and soul of the band was the singer and guitarist, known as Tom Gabel. His powerful, gritty voice was one of the most recognizable in rock. The band's songs were full of angst and anger. What fans didn't know was what all that anger was about. For his entire life, Tom Gabel had been dealing with gender dysphoria. He felt he was a woman, and the secret was, in his own words, slowly poisoning him. He was married and had a child, but this secret was always there. He would privately dress as a woman in hotel rooms on tour, terrified of being discovered. Finally, in 2012, he made a decision. In a huge article in Rolling Stone magazine, the singer came out as a trans woman, taking the name Laura Jane Grace. It was a bombshell. She was one of the first major rock stars to transition publicly. Laura Jane Grace's punk rock story was groundbreaking. Our next musician was also a powerful woman in a male-dominated scene, but her fight was different. 10. Otep Shamaya. In the early 2000s, the nu metal scene was at its peak. Bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit, and Slipknot ruled the airwaves. It was a scene dominated by aggressive male energy. And then came a band called Otep. At the front of this band was a woman, Otep Shamaya. She was a whirlwind of power. She could deliver poetic spoken-word verses 1 second and then unleash a deep guttural roar the next. From the very beginning, Otep was openly lesbian. But here's the thing people forget. In the world of Ozfest and early 2000s metal, that was a huge deal. She wasn't a closet case in the same way as others, but she faced a different kind of secrecy. She was pressured by the industry to tone down who she was. People told her not to talk about her partners, to not be too political. They wanted her to just be the angry chick in the band. Otep refused. She put her identity front and center in her music. She was a major figure for LGBTQ+ visibility in a genre that had very little. Otep was a woman who refused to hide. Our next star is also a powerful woman in rock, but she waited years to speak about her own private life. 11. Lzzy Hale. If you listen to modern rock radio, you know Lzzy Hale. She is the front woman for the band Halestorm. She has a monster voice, she shreds on guitar, and she has won a Grammy for Best Hard Rock Performance. She is, without a doubt, one of the biggest stars in rock music today. For years, her public image was just that, a rock and roll powerhouse. For a long time, she kept her private life exactly that, private. But in 2014, in a post on her social media, she answered a fan's question about her identity. She simply stated that she is bisexual. She said she has had her joys with both women and men. It wasn't a huge press conference or a magazine cover. It was just a simple, honest statement. What's interesting is how she fits the closet theme. She wasn't hiding in fear, but she was part of a generation that just didn't talk about it. The industry preferred its rock stars to be a blank slate. Lzzy Hale's casual, open statement showed how much things had changed. Lzzy Hale is a modern rock icon. Our next star was an icon of the 90s, a black woman fronting a metal band, which was almost unheard of. 12. Skin. Back in the 90s, the Brit rock scene was blowing up, but one band, Skunk Anansie, was heavier and angrier than the rest. They were a mix of metal, punk, and hard rock, and their singer, Skin, was absolutely magnetic. She was a tall, black woman with a shaved head and a voice that could go from a whisper to a scream. She was, to put it mildly, intimidating and awesome. But the music world in the 90s didn't know what to do with her. She was a black woman in a white male rock world. And on top of that, she was bisexual. In the early days, this was not something she talked about in the press. The media was already focused on her race and her look. She felt that adding her private life into the mix would just be too much for people to handle. It was a form of closet, built by the industry's own prejudices. Later in her career, she became much more open, writing and speaking about her relationships with both men and women. Skin had to hide parts of herself to fit in. Our next musician came from the hardcore punk scene, and his influence on metal is undeniable. 13. Bob Mould. The band is Husker Du, pronounced Husker Du. In the 1980s, they were one of the most important bands in America. They took the speed of hardcore punk and mixed it with melody, basically creating the blueprint for alternative rock and influencing countless metal bands. The driving force of the band was guitarist and singer Bob Mould. His music was a wall of noise and pure, raw feeling. But all that anger and pain in his songs was coming from a very real, secret place. Bob Mould was a gay man, living in the rough-and-tumble, tough guy punk scene of the 80s. He felt completely isolated. He poured all of his frustration about his hidden life into his music. The band became legendary, but Bob was living a lie. It wasn't until the early 90s, after the band had broken up, that he finally came out in a magazine interview. Many fans were shocked. They had listened to his angry anthems for years, never knowing the real reason behind all that pain. Bob Mould's pain was hidden in his lyrics. Our next star is a true rock legend, but his private life was so confusing, even he had trouble explaining it. 14. Pete Townshend. Pete Townshend is a rock god, period. As the guitarist and main songwriter for The Who, he invented the power chord. He smashed guitars. He wrote My Generation. The Who was one of the loudest, most aggressive bands of their time, a direct ancestor of heavy metal. Pete's public image was that of a smart, angry, and very heterosexual rock star. He was married to a woman for over 30 years. But here's the kicker. In the late 90s, he stunned the world by revealing that he had, at times, been attracted to men. He later clarified his words, saying he wasn't gay, but that he'd had gay experiences. This created a huge stir. The rock world didn't know what to do with this information. It's a different kind of closet. It's a closet of confusion. Townshend's story shows that not everything is black and white. He was a man from an older generation trying to make sense of feelings that the world told him were wrong. Townshend played with his image, but our next star was the image. He basically invented the idea of playing with identity in rock and roll. 15. David Bowie. You simply cannot talk about the history of rock, heavy metal, or glam rock without talking about David Bowie. He wasn't just a musician. He was an alien, a magician, a genuine cultural force that changed what a rock star could be. His 1972 album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, was more than just a collection of songs. It was a complete, top-to-bottom character. Ziggy was a bisexual alien rock star here to save the world, and this character influenced thousands of bands that followed, from the outrageous look to the stadium-shaking sound. Bowie was a true artist, always changing, always evolving, and always pushing buttons. And one of the very first and most explosive buttons he pushed was identity. Back in 1972, at the absolute peak of the Ziggy mania, he gave an interview to the Melody Maker magazine. In it, he calmly and famously declared, "I'm gay and always have been." This was an absolutely shocking, earth-shattering statement for the time. This was years before such a thing was even remotely acceptable in mainstream society. It was a massive wow factor moment that made him a hero to some and a villain to others. But here's the twist in the story. Was it true? The truth with David Bowie is never simple. At the time, he made that statement. Bowie was married to a woman, the fiery Angela "Angie" Bowie. They had a son together. He would later have very public, very loving relationships with women, most famously with his wife, the supermodel Iman. So, what was the deal? Later in his life, in the 80s and 90s, when he was a global pop superstar with hits like Let's Dance, he took it all back. He told Rolling Stone that his 1972 declaration was a lie and the biggest mistake I ever made. He said he was always just a closet heterosexual. So, what was the truth? Was he gay? Was he bisexual? Was he straight? The answer is yes. He was an artist. Bowie didn't just use ambiguity, he weaponized it. He used the idea of being gay as a costume, just like his makeup and his orange hair. He understood that the mystery was more powerful than the reality. He played with the media, he played with gender, and in doing so, he kept his real, private, inner self a total mystery to everyone. He created a shield of personas, and it worked so well that to this day, nobody can truly say they knew the real David Bowie. Bowie used ambiguity as a shield. Our next star was a close friend of his, and for him, the closet wasn't a costume. It was a place of deep, agonizing pain. 16. Elton John. Wait, is Elton John heavy metal? Absolutely not. But he is a massive central pillar of rock history, and his story is absolutely central to this topic. In the 1970s, he was arguably the biggest rock star on earth. He was just a piano player, but his concerts at places like Dodger Stadium were as big, as loud, and as over-the-top as any heavy metal show. He was known for his wild glasses, his skyscraper-high platform boots, and his crazy feathered costumes. He was, much like his good friends David Bowie and Freddie Mercury, a flamboyant, untouchable showman. He was a rock god on a piano stool, but he was hiding. He was hiding in plain sight. In 1976, at the peak of his fame, he gave a very candid interview to Rolling Stone, where he said he was bisexual. "I am bisexual," he said. "There's nothing wrong with it." For 1976, this was a nuclear bomb, and the backlash was immediate and brutal. Fans were angry. They wrote letters. They burned his records. Radio stations in the U.S. stopped playing his music. His record sales took a nosedive. It was a professional disaster. So what did he do? He ran. He went straight back into the closet and slammed the door shut. He denied it. He tried to fix it. In 1984, he did the most shocking thing of all. He got married to a woman. Her name was Renate Blauel, a German recording engineer. The wedding was a massive, over-the-top public event in Australia. There were pictures, magazine covers, all of it. But it was all a mask. It was a performance. The truth was, Elton John was a gay man, and he was struggling badly. He was struggling with his identity, with the pressure of fame, and with a heavy, out-of-control party lifestyle. He later said he was a broken man during that time trying to be something he wasn't. The marriage, of course, didn't last. It wasn't until years later, after he finally got clean and sober in 1990, that he was able to stop hiding. He had to save himself before he could be himself. Only then was he able to come out, fully and finally, as a gay man and live his truth, eventually meeting his husband, David Furnish. Elton John's story shows the immense, crushing pressure to stay hidden. Our next star is one of the founding fathers of rock and roll, and his whole life was a painful battle between his faith and his true feelings. 17. Little Richard. Before heavy metal, before hard rock, before the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, there was rock and roll. And the man who arguably invented it all, the true architect of rock and roll, was Little Richard. His songs, like Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally, were explosions of pure energy. His screaming, raw voice, his pounding, frantic piano playing, and his wild, flamboyant look in the 1950s set the stage for everyone who came after. From David Bowie's makeup to Freddie Mercury's showmanship, it all starts with Richard. He was, to put it mildly, the original, and he was, by his own admission, gay. In the 1950s, this is the part of the story that is hard to even imagine. In the deeply conservative black and white 1950s, Little Richard was out. He would perform in drag in clubs before he was famous using the name Princess Lavon. He wore makeup, he had his signature pompadour hairstyle, and he made no secret of his sexuality to those around him. But here's the tragic part. Little Richard was also a deeply, profoundly religious man. He was raised in the Deep South, and the church was a core part of his life, and his entire life, from the 1950s until his death in 2020, was a massive, painful war inside his own head. He was trapped. He would have relationships with men, then be so overwhelmed with guilt and fear that he would renounce it all, becoming a preacher and warning others against the devil's music and sin. In 1957, at the absolute height of his fame, he quit rock and roll cold turkey. He famously threw his expensive jewelry into a river and went to Bible college. Then, a few years later, he would go back to rock and roll, then back to preaching, then back to rock. He was trapped between his church, which told him he was a sinner, and his true self. He was in and out of the closet his entire life, a 70-year struggle that was both public and deeply private. He never found peace. In his final years, he was still giving contradictory interviews, one day calling himself omnisexual and the next condemning homosexuality as unnatural. He was a true original and a man torn in two. Little Richard was a true original. Our next star is also an original, a woman who broke all the rules but kept one very important part of her life under lock and key. 18. Janis Joplin. Janis Joplin was not a singer, she was a force of nature. In the 1960s, a time when rock was almost completely dominated by men, she was one of the only female rock stars who was just as raw, just as loud, and just as powerful as any of them. Her voice was pure gravel and soul. When you heard her sing "Piece of My Heart," you felt it. She was the queen of psychedelic rock, the star of Woodstock. Her public image was all about being completely free. She was the original hippie wild child. Her brand was authenticity. She was known for being a hard-living, hard-partying, filter-free woman with a bottle of Southern Comfort whiskey always in her hand. The thing nobody tells you is that this free image was also a kind of cover. It was a carefully managed version of freedom. Publicly, Janis was known for her high-profile and often stormy relationships with men. She had flings with fellow musicians and cultural icons like Jim Morrison, Joe Namath, and Chris Christopherson. This was the story the media loved. The wild, emotional woman who just needed the right man. But privately, Janis had deep, loving, and intimate relationships with women. This was a side of her life she did not and could not share with the public. Her biographers are very clear on this. Her longest and perhaps most stable relationship during her most famous years was with a woman named Peggy Caserta. So why hide it? In the free love 1960s, it seems like a contradiction, but that freedom had very clear limits. Being a hippie was one thing, but being a dyke, as they would have called her, was a commercial endgame. It didn't fit the brand. It wasn't sexy in a way that Rolling Stone magazine could sell. It would have ended her career. So this woman who built her entire legend on being real and open was forced to hide the most important relationships in her life. It's a reminder that even the freest people in rock and roll history often had a part of themselves they had to keep hidden. It was a secret she took with her when she died at the tragic age of 27. Janis Joplin kept her private life a secret. Our next star built an entire career on being private, refusing to be put in any box at all. 19. Joan Jett. Joan Jett is the godmother of punk and heavy rock. She is an icon. She's the fiery leader of the Blackhearts and a co-founder of the pioneering all-girl band, The Runaways. When she was just a teenager, she was on stage with Cherry Bomb, proving women could be loud, aggressive, and in your face. Then her solo career exploded. Her song, "I Love Rock and Roll," is not just a song, it's a global anthem. Her other song, "Bad Reputation," wasn't just a hit, it was a mission statement. Her look, the black leather, the messy shag haircut, the heavy eyeliner, the tough "don't mess with me" attitude, is legendary. She proved once and for all that women could rock just as hard, if not harder, than men. For her entire 40-plus-year career, the media has been absolutely obsessed with one question, a question that has followed her into every interview. Who does she love? Is she gay? Is she bisexual? Is she straight? And for 40-plus years, Joan Jett has refused to answer. This is her version of the closet. It's a privacy closet. It's not born from shame, like Elton John's. It's not a performance, like David Bowie's. It's an act of defiance. She has never put a label on herself. She has famously said over and over that she wants people to focus on her music, not on her private life. It is a complete power move. She has been a massive, outspoken supporter of LGBTQ+ rights for decades. She has played benefits, she has marched, she has supported the community in every way. But she has always kept her own story to herself. She refuses to give the media the one-line label they want. She said in one interview, "I'm not going to say yes or no to that question because that's not what it's about. I want you to be so into the music that you don't care. She refuses to let the world define her by anything other than her music. She demands to be judged on her riffs, not her relationships. Joan Jett's image is all about being a tough, authentic rocker. The music they made was immortal, but the artists themselves were not. These heavy metal icons seemed invincible on stage, but they were fighting a losing battle against alcohol addiction. We're counting down the stars who were completely destroyed by the bottle, and the tragic tale of the cherry pie guy is a true heartbreaker. 1. Bon Scott. Many people are crazy about the band AC/DC, and for a lot of fans, Bon Scott was its one true voice. With his gritty, powerful vocals and wild man energy, he helped turn the Australian band into global superstars. Songs like Highway to Hell weren't just songs, they were anthems for a generation. Bon lived the rock star life to the fullest. He was the life of the party, a charming rogue who always had a bottle in his hand and a story to tell. His hard-living image was a huge part of the band's appeal. They were dangerous, they were loud, and they were real. But the thing nobody tells you is that the image was all too real. Bon's relationship with the bottle was not just for show. It was a deep and destructive habit. What many overlooked was that his constant partying was taking a serious toll. Band members would later recall that his overindulgence was getting worse and worse. He was a professional on stage, but off stage he was spiraling. The most shocking fact is how quickly it all came to an end. In February of 1980, after a night of heavy drinking in London, Bon Scott passed out in a friend's car. He was left there to sleep it off, a decision that would prove to be a fatal mistake. He was found unresponsive the next morning. At just 33 years old, the voice of a generation was silenced by what was officially called acute alcohol poisoning. Losing a singer is a tragedy, but what happens when a band loses its very heartbeat? 2. John Bonham. When you talk about the greatest drummers of all time, the name John Bonham is always at the top of the list. He was the thunderous engine behind Led Zeppelin, one of the biggest and most powerful bands in history. His drumming wasn't just keeping time, it was an event. His famous solo on the song Moby Dick could last for over 20 minutes, a display of power and skill that left audiences breathless. The band was legendary for its massive success and its equally massive backstage antics. They defined the term rock star excess, with stories of trashed hotel rooms and wild parties following them around the world. At the center of it all was Bonham, a man with a huge talent and an even bigger appetite for chaos. You see, his reputation as a heavy drinker was as legendary as his drumming. They called him Bonzo, and his capacity for alcohol was astonishing. To put it mildly, he could outdrink almost anyone. But this wasn't just fun and games. It was a serious problem that was beginning to affect the band. He would sometimes show up to the studio too unwell to play properly, and his behavior could be unpredictable. The band was growing worried, but it was hard to stop the train once it was moving at full speed. The final party came to a horrifying end in September of 1980. While preparing for a North American tour, Bonham started drinking early in the day. The shocking detail is that he reportedly consumed around 40 shots of vodka before passing out. He was put to bed at guitarist Jimmy Page's house, but he never woke up. The 32-year-old had met the same fate as Bon Scott. Bonham's passing didn't just end his life, it ended the band. But for our next star, the end came much slower. 3. Steve Clark. In the 1980s, Def Leppard was on top of the world. They were a stadium-filling machine, with albums like Pyromania and Hysteria selling millions upon millions of copies. A huge part of their signature sound came from the guitar duo of Phil Collen and Steve Clark. Clark, nicknamed the Riffmaster, was a gifted songwriter and a charismatic performer. He co-wrote many of the band's biggest hits, including Photograph and Pour Some Sugar on Me. He had a knack for creating monster guitar hooks that you couldn't get out of your head. On stage, he was a picture of rock cool, with his low-slung guitar and confident swagger. But not all things are what they seem. Behind the cool exterior, Steve Clark was fighting a terrible battle. His struggle with alcohol was an open secret within the band for years. His addiction was so severe that it became a major problem during the recording of Hysteria. His bandmates tried everything to help him. They would send him home from the studio, talk to him, and even stage interventions. The most shocking part is that during a break from the band, his fellow members found him passed out in a gutter in Minneapolis. They had to fly him to a treatment center. The band gave him a 6-month leave of absence in 1990 to get himself together. It was a final desperate attempt to save their friend. Tragically, it didn't work. In January of 1991, Steve Clark was found in his London home. He had accidentally mixed too much alcohol with prescription medication. He was only 30 years old. Clark's story is a heartbreaker, but for our next musician, the fall from grace was even more public and prolonged. 4. Johnny Lane. If you were alive in the early 1990s, you couldn't escape the song Cherry Pie. It was a massive hit for the glam metal band Warrant, and it turned their lead singer, Johnny Lane, into an overnight superstar. With his long blonde hair and pretty boy looks, he was the perfect frontman for the MTV generation. He wrote the song as a last-minute addition to the album, scribbling the lyrics on a pizza box in about 15 minutes. That one song defined his entire career, for better and for worse. Warrant sold millions of records, toured the world, and lived the high life. The thing nobody tells you is that Johnny Lane grew to hate that song. He felt it was a silly, shallow tune that overshadowed his more serious songwriting. He felt like a joke, and that feeling ate away at him for years. As the glam metal scene faded away, Lane's career began to struggle, and his reliance on the bottle grew stronger and stronger. What many overlooked was just how bad things got. His later years were a sad cycle of public intoxication, run-ins with the law for driving under the influence, and failed attempts at getting clean. To put it mildly, it was a slow-motion catastrophe. Friends and family watched helplessly as the man who once graced the cover of magazines became a shadow of his former self. In August of 2011, the final chapter was written. Johnny Lane was found in a Comfort Inn hotel room in Los Angeles, surrounded by bottles. He was only 47 years old. The Cherry Pie Guy's story is a classic tale of fame's dark side, but some stories of addiction go even further back. 5. David Byron. In the 1970s, Uriah Heep was one of the pioneers of heavy metal and progressive rock. With their soaring vocal harmonies, heavy organ sounds, and fantasy-themed lyrics, they created a unique style that won them a huge following. At the front of it all was their lead singer, or David Byron. He was a frontman in the classic sense of the word. He had a powerful, multi-octave voice and a flamboyant, theatrical stage presence that was absolutely captivating. He was the kind of singer who could hold an entire arena in the palm of his hand. He was a true rock god of his era. But you see, there was a dark side to his incredible talent. David Byron's drinking was legendary even in an era of legendary drinkers. The bottle was a constant companion, and it started to affect his performance and his reliability. The band grew tired of his erratic behavior. The most shocking fact is that things came to a head during a show in Philadelphia in 1976. Byron was so intoxicated on stage that he was singing off-key and slurring his words. The band had finally had enough. After the show, they made the difficult decision to fire him from the band he had helped build. It was a stunning fall from grace. He tried to launch a solo career and form other bands, but he could never recapture the magic. His addiction had taken its toll, and his voice was never the same. In 1985, at the young age of 38, David Byron's body finally gave out. Firing a singer is a drastic step, but our next star's band had to watch as he went down a similar path. 6. Phil Lynott. Phil Lynott was one of a kind. As the frontman, bassist, and main songwriter for the Irish band Thin Lizzy, he broke all the rules. He was a black man in a mostly white rock world, and he brought a poetic, romantic soul to the tough guy world of hard rock. His songs were stories filled with vivid characters and unforgettable melodies. Hits like The Boys Are Back in Town and Jailbreak are still classic rock radio staples. On stage, he was pure charisma with his signature afro, mirrored sunglasses, and confident swagger. He was a true poet of the streets. The thing nobody tells you, though, is that the romantic, wild man image he projected in his music was how he lived his life, especially when it came to partying. Phil's battles with his personal demons were well documented. He struggled with a lifestyle of excess that became inseparable from his identity. The bottle was a central part of that lifestyle. After Thin Lizzy broke up in 1983, his problems escalated. What many overlooked was that the end of the band left a huge void in his life, one that he tried to fill with more and more indulgence. To put it mildly, his health began to rapidly decline. In late 1985, after a binge at his home, he collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was already done. Years of heavy drinking and other bad habits had taken their toll. On January 4, 1986, Phil Lynott passed away at the age of 36. Lynott's story is a tragedy of a great artist consumed by his own legend. But what happens when addiction hits a band known for being the angriest in metal? 7. Jeff Hanneman. Slayer is one of the big four of thrash metal, known for their blistering speed, aggressive sound, and dark, controversial lyrics. For over 30 years, they were one of the most uncompromising bands in music. A huge part of their iconic sound came from the guitar work of Jeff Hanneman. He was not only a ferocious player, but also the band's main musical architect, writing the music for classic songs like Raining Blood and Angel of Death. His riffs were a masterclass in controlled chaos, and his contributions defined the very sound of thrash metal. But here's the kicker. While the band maintained a brutal public image, Hanneman was fighting a private war. He was a heavy drinker for most of his adult life, a habit that was quietly causing serious damage to his body. The situation took a bizarre and tragic turn in 2011. Hanneman was bitten by a spider, which led to a severe flesh-eating disease in his arm. He almost lost the arm entirely and had to undergo multiple surgeries. He was forced to step away from the band to recover. The most shocking fact is that while the spider bite was the immediate problem, his body's inability to heal was made much worse by his long-term alcohol abuse. His liver was failing. For the next 2 years, he struggled with his health. In May of 2013, Jeff Hanneman's body finally gave up. The official cause of his passing was alcohol-related cirrhosis. He was 49. A spider bite seems like a freak accident, but our next star's downfall was just as sudden and shocking. 8. Alexi Laiho. For a new generation of metalheads, Alexi Laiho was a guitar hero. As the frontman for the Finnish band Children of Bodom, he was a true virtuoso. He blended the speed and aggression of death metal with the melodic, classical-inspired solos of old-school heavy metal. His skill was breathtaking. He was known for his shredding ability, playing incredibly fast and complex passages with seeming ease. The band became one of Finland's best-selling musical acts of all time, and Alexi was their undisputed star, a charismatic and energetic leader. You see, like many rock stars before him, Alexei lived a life of constant touring and partying. The bottle was always present. He was open about his drinking, often seeing it as just part of the rock and roll lifestyle. But as the years went on, the habit began to take a serious toll. What many overlooked was the severity of the damage being done to his body. He suffered from stomach ulcers and other health issues that were directly related to his heavy consumption. His friends and family were deeply concerned, but he struggled to break the cycle. To put it mildly, he was burning the candle at both ends. The final shocking news came at the very end of 2020. Alexei Laiho passed away at his home in Helsinki. He was only 41 years old. It was later revealed that he had been suffering from long-term liver and pancreas degeneration caused by his years of alcohol abuse. It's tragic to lose such a young talent, but some artists' battles with the bottle are a lifelong struggle. 9. Gary Moore. Gary Moore, was a guitarist's guitarist. Hailing from Northern Ireland, he was a true virtuoso, respected by his peers for his incredible skill and emotional playing. He started his career with the classic rock band Thin Lizzy before launching a very successful solo career. He could play anything from blistering hard rock and heavy metal to soulful melodic blues. His 1990 album, Still Got the Blues, was a massive worldwide hit and introduced a whole new audience to his amazing talent. He was known for his intense, passionate performances and his signature guitar tone. But not all things are what they seem. Behind the incredible talent was a man who had a long and difficult relationship with alcohol. His drinking was a part of his life for decades, stretching all the way back to his early days in the music scene. While he managed to maintain a successful career for many years, the habit was always there, lurking in the background. The most shocking part of his story is how suddenly it all ended. In February of 2011, while on vacation in Spain, Gary Moore was found unresponsive in his hotel room. He had passed away in his sleep from a heart attack. He was 58 years old. An investigation later confirmed that he had consumed a massive amount of alcohol the night before, a level that was a key factor in his sudden passing. It was a tragic end for a man who still had so much music left to give. Moore's end was sudden and private, but our next star's struggles with the bottle were very loud and very public. 10. Kevin DuBrow. Quiet Riot was one of the bands that brought heavy metal to the mainstream in the 1980s. Their 1983 album, Metal Health, was the very first heavy metal album to ever hit #1 on the Billboard charts. At the front of it all was their loud, opinionated, and charismatic singer, Kevin DuBrow. With his powerful voice and energetic stage presence, he was the classic 80s rock frontman. The band's cover of the Slade song, Come On Feel the Noise, became an anthem for a generation of headbangers. The thing nobody tells you is that Kevin's personality was as loud off stage as it was on. He was known for being outspoken and for having a big mouth, which often got him into trouble with other bands and the press. That larger-than-life personality was fueled by a classic rock and roll lifestyle. The party never seemed to stop. But as the years went by, the partying took a darker turn. What many overlooked was the toll that years of indulgence were taking. After Quiet Riot's initial fame faded, DuBrow struggled to keep the band going through various lineup changes. His personal battles continued away from the spotlight. In November of 2007, friends became concerned when they couldn't reach him. He was found at his home in Las Vegas. The 52-year-old had passed away from an accidental overdose of a mix of substances, with alcohol being a major contributor. DuBrow's story is a familiar one, but the next musician's fall was part of a much darker scene. 11. Mike Starr. In the early 1990s, the music world was turned upside down by the grunge movement out of Seattle. Alice in Chains was one of the darkest and heaviest bands to come out of that scene. Their music was sludgy, powerful, and filled with a sense of gloom. A key part of their unique grinding sound was the bass playing of Mike Starr. He was a founding member of the band, and his heavy, driving bass lines were the foundation for their first two classic albums, Facelift and Dirt. But you see, the darkness in their music was a reflection of the band's real-life struggles. The entire band was caught in a downward spiral of heavy indulgence, and Mike Starr was right in the middle of it. His issues with addiction became so severe that it started to impact his ability to function in the band. To put it mildly, his life was becoming unmanageable. In 1993, at the height of the band's fame, he was asked to leave Alice in Chains. The most shocking fact is that his life continued on a tragic path for years. He was in and out of trouble with the law and was even featured on the reality show Celebrity Rehab, where his struggles were broadcast for the world to see. Despite attempts to get clean, he could never escape his demons. In March of 2011, Mike Starr was found in a home in Salt Lake City. He was 44 years old. Losing a band member is devastating, but the next band on our list also lost their drummer far too young. 12. The Reverend, Avenged. Seven Pale exploded onto the metal scene in the 2000s with a sound that blended classic heavy metal with modern punk and metalcore. They became one of the biggest metal bands of their generation, known for their flashy guitar solos, catchy hooks, and incredible musicianship. A huge part of their creative force was their drummer, Jimmy the Rev Sullivan. He wasn't just a drummer, he was a multi-instrumentalist, a singer, and one of the band's primary songwriters. His drumming was wild and unpredictable, and his creative vision was all over their music. But here's the kicker. The Reverend lived a fast and furious life, much like the music he created. He was known for his wild personality and his love of partying. The lifestyle was an integral part of his identity. While the band was reaching new heights of success with their 2007 self-titled album, the Rev's personal habits were becoming a source of concern. What many overlooked was just how dangerous his lifestyle had become. He was mixing alcohol with various other substances, a combination that was putting his body under immense strain. The band was like a family, and they were worried about their brother. The tragedy struck in December of 2009. The Reverend was found at his home in Huntington Beach, California. He was only 28 years old. His passing was ruled an accidental overdose from a combination of prescription medications and alcohol. The loss of a creative heart is a blow few bands survive, but our next story involves a legal nightmare fueled by the bottle. 13. Dave Holland. From 1979 to 1989, Dave Holland was the drummer for the legendary Judas Priest. This was the band's golden era, the period when they released classic, genre-defining albums like British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance. Holland's powerful, straight-ahead drumming was the backbone of their sound during their rise to global superstardom. He was part of the machine that made Judas Priest one of the most important heavy metal bands in history. But the thing nobody tells you is that after he left the band, his life took a very dark turn. He continued to struggle with his personal demons, including a long-standing battle with the bottle. The story takes a truly shocking turn, though, with events that landed him in serious legal trouble. These issues, compounded by his ongoing problems with his habits, led to a complete downfall. He ended up serving time in prison, a turn of events that completely destroyed his reputation and career in music. After being released, he lived a very private life in Spain. To put it mildly, he had hit rock bottom. His health, battered by years of hard living and the stress of his legal battles, began to fail. In January of 2018, Dave Holland passed away at the age of 69. His life was a cautionary tale about how quickly things can fall apart. Holland's story is one of legal troubles, but our next star managed to pull back from the brink just in time. 14. Rob Halford. Rob Halford is the metal god. As the frontman for Judas Priest, he helped define the sound and the look of heavy metal. With his soaring, operatic vocals and his leather and studs fashion sense, he is one of the most iconic figures in music history. He commanded the stage with an unmatched power and presence. For decades, he has been the voice of heavy metal, a true legend who has influenced countless singers who came after him. But you see, for a long time, the metal god was hiding a secret pain. He struggled for years with his identity in a very conservative time, and he used alcohol as a way to cope with his inner turmoil. By the mid-1980s, his drinking had become a life-threatening problem. What many overlooked was just how close he came to the edge. He has since admitted that he was in a very dark place, and his addiction was consuming him completely. The turning point came in January of 1986. After a night of particularly heavy indulgence, he reached his lowest point. It was a wake-up call that he could not ignore. He checked himself into a treatment facility and has been sober ever since. The most shocking part is realizing that at the peak of their fame, the band was on the verge of losing its iconic voice forever. He managed to pull himself back from the edge and has continued his legendary career for decades. Halford found sobriety, but his former bandmate Ozzy Osbourne's battle with the bottle is perhaps the most famous in rock history. 15. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne is more than a musician. He's a cultural icon. As the original singer of Black Sabbath, he helped invent heavy metal. With his spooky wail and manic stage presence, he was the perfect frontman for their dark and heavy sound. After leaving Sabbath, he launched an incredibly successful solo career that made him an even bigger star. For better or worse, his name became synonymous with rock and roll excess. Biting the head off a bat is just one of the many wild stories that define his legend. The thing nobody tells you is just how much of that legend was fueled by, and nearly destroyed by, alcohol. Ozzy's consumption was off the charts, even by rock star standards. His drinking was so out of control that it got him fired from Black Sabbath in 1979. They simply couldn't work with him anymore. His solo career was plagued by his addiction. He would miss shows, give terrible performances, and his health was constantly in jeopardy. To put it mildly, he was a walking disaster. The most shocking fact is the sheer volume of his intake. He would reportedly drink multiple bottles of hard liquor every single day. He has admitted in interviews that he is amazed he is still alive. After decades of chaos, and with the unwavering support of his wife Sharon, Ozzy finally managed to get a handle on his addiction in the 2000s. Ozzy was fired from his band, but our next star's drinking nearly tore his own band apart from the inside. 16. James Hetfield. For millions of fans, Metallica is the biggest metal band on the planet, and James Hetfield is their heart and soul. With his ferocious rhythm guitar playing and his signature growl, he is one of the most recognizable figures in music. He wrote the riffs and the lyrics for a string of classic albums like Master of Puppets and the Black Album that changed the face of heavy metal forever. On stage, he is a commanding presence, a true general leading his army of fans. But here's the kicker. For years, the band had a nickname, Alcoholica. They were famous for their heavy partying ways in their early days. For Hetfield, however, it was more than just partying. It was a way of dealing with a troubled childhood and the pressures of fame. As the band got bigger, his reliance on the bottle grew deeper. The problem came to a head in the early 2000s during the chaotic recording of the Saint Anger album. The behind-the-scenes documentary, Some Kind of Monster, showed the world just how bad things had gotten. Hetfield's temper was flaring, he was fighting with his bandmates, and the band was on the verge of breaking up. The most shocking moment was when he abruptly left the studio and checked himself into a long-term treatment facility. No one knew if he would ever come back. The biggest metal band in the world was completely falling apart. Thankfully, he did come back, sober and ready to work, saving the band from total collapse. Hetfield's struggle was captured on film, and so was the near disaster of our next frontman. 17. Corey Taylor. Slipknot burst onto the scene in the late 1990s like a nightmare come to life. With their 9 members, terrifying masks, and chaotic, aggressive music, they were unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. At the center of the storm was their singer, Corey Taylor. Known as Number 8, he possessed a stunning vocal range, able to switch from brutal, guttural screams to beautiful, melodic singing in an instant. He was the voice of a new, angry generation of metal fans. But the chaos on stage was often matched by the chaos in his personal life. Corey Taylor has been very open about his long and brutal battle with alcohol. He started drinking heavily as a teenager to cope with a difficult upbringing. When Slipknot blew up, the rock star lifestyle only threw gasoline on the fire. What many overlooked was just how dark things got. He has described himself as a full-blown, raging alcoholic during the band's early years. The absolute lowest point came in 2003. At a party at the Rainbow Bar and Grill in Hollywood, he became so intoxicated that he tried to jump off a hotel balcony. His friend stopped him just in time. It was a terrifying wake-up call. That night, he knew he had to make a change. He has been sober for many years now, but he has never shied away from talking about how close he came to losing everything. The 20 were a wild time for heavy metal, and these stars were on top of the world. But when the music scene changed overnight, one of the most famous faces in rock went from superstardom to working a desk job, his fortune completely gone. 1. K. Downing. The priest who lost his temple. You might be wondering how a founding member of Judas Priest, one of the most legendary metal bands of all time, could ever run into money problems. K. Downing wasn't just a guitarist. He was a key architect of the band's sound, a multimillionaire who had earned his place in rock history. But what most people don't realize is that his passion outside of music would lead to his financial ruin. Downing poured his heart, soul, and a fortune into a personal project, a luxury golf resort and hotel at his estate in Shropshire, England. He envisioned it as a world-class destination. The problem was, building a high-end resort costs a mind-boggling amount of money. The project was plagued by delays and went wildly over budget. Truth be told, he was sinking millions of his own cash into a black hole. It's crazy to think about, but the very thing he hoped would be his legacy became an anchor dragging him down. The financial strain became so immense that it contributed to his decision to leave Judas Priest in 2011, a band he had been in for over 40 years. He had to sell his share of the band's rights just to try and cover the debts from his failed resort. He went from being a metal god to a man fighting to save his home. Downing's story is a tough lesson in business, but his financial fall was slow. The next star lost it all in a blink. 2. Vince Neil, the voice that outspent a fortune. Motley Crue was the definition of 80s excess. They sold over 100 million records, and at the front of it all was Vince Neil, the charismatic singer whose face was on posters in millions of bedrooms. The money flowed like water, and Neil spent it even faster. The thing is, his financial troubles weren't a one-time event. They were a lifestyle. He had a passion for starting businesses, but unfortunately, he had unbelievably bad luck. He launched his own airline, Vince Neil Aviation, which was a spectacular failure that burned through cash. He opened tattoo parlors, bars, and even a tequila brand. While some had brief moments of success, many of them folded, costing him a fortune each time. What's often overlooked is that Neil's lavish personal spending never slowed down. He had a fleet of exotic cars, homes, and an appetite for the high life that even his massive royalty checks couldn't always support. There were multiple times throughout his career, especially after he briefly left Motley Crue in the 90s, that he found himself in serious financial trouble, facing lawsuits and mounting bills. He was a rock star who simply couldn't stop spending, a lesson in how fast a massive fortune can disappear when you treat your bank account like an open bar. If a string of bad businesses sounds rough, imagine losing it all because the entire world decided your music was no longer cool. 3. Dee Snider, the Twisted Sister star, left straight, broke. Dee Snider was the mouthpiece of a generation. As the frontman for Twisted Sister, he was one of the most recognizable figures in music, screaming anthems like, "We're not gonna take it." In the mid-'80s, he was on top of the world. He had a mansion, fancy cars, and was a household name. But the music industry is a fickle beast. What most people don't realize is how fast the party ended. When the grunge scene exploded in the early 90s, bands like Twisted Sister were seen as relics of the past. Their record sales plummeted, the tours dried up, and suddenly the money was gone. Dee has been incredibly open about his fall. He made some bad investments, trusting the wrong people, and by the late 90s he was flat broke. He lost his house and had to take on any job he could to support his family. It's crazy to think about, but the man who once defied Congress was now working a 9-to-5 office job and doing voiceovers for commercials. His story is a powerful reminder that in the music world, fame is not forever, and a fortune can vanish as quickly as the trend that created it. Dee Snider had to rebuild from nothing, but the next star on our list faced a battle not with the industry, but with his own health. 4. Mick Mars, the quiet man's costly war. Mick Mars was the quiet, mysterious engine of Motley Crue. His heavy, blues-inspired guitar riffs were the backbone of their sound. While the other members were famous for their wild antics, Mars was known for his private nature. The thing is, he was hiding a secret battle. Since he was a teenager, Mars has suffered from ankylosing spondylitis, a severe and painful form of arthritis that fuses the bones in the spine. For decades, he toured the world in constant, agonizing pain. This condition not only took a physical toll, but also a massive financial one. The medical bills for managing such a chronic illness are astronomical. Over the years, he has undergone numerous surgeries and treatments, all of which cost a fortune. What's often overlooked is that his condition eventually made it impossible for him to keep up with the grueling demands of touring. This led to his retirement from the road and ultimately a bitter legal dispute with the band he helped create. He claimed they were trying to push him out and unfairly cut his share of the profits. Legal battles like that are incredibly expensive, draining millions in fees. His story is a heartbreaking example of how a lifetime of success can be undone by forces completely outside your control. A fight with your own band is one thing, but our next rocker took on the most powerful couple in metal and paid a steep price. 5. Carmine Appice, the drummer who battled an Ozzy-pocalypse. Carmine Appice is a drumming legend. He played with everyone from Vanilla Fudge to Rod Stewart. In the early 80s, he landed a dream gig, joining Ozzy Osbourne's band for the Bark at the Moon album and tour. You might be wondering how a job like that could lead to financial disaster. Truth be told, it all fell apart in a storm of lawsuits. Appice was not just a drummer in the band. He claimed he was also a songwriter who helped pen some of the tracks. But when it came time to get paid his writing royalties, he said the money never came. This led him to sue Ozzy and, more pointedly, his manager and wife, Sharon Osbourne. What most people don't realize is that taking on the Osbournes in court is like fighting a hurricane. They have a reputation for being incredibly tough in business. The legal fight dragged on, costing Appice a fortune in lawyers' fees. He eventually settled, but the entire ordeal left him financially and emotionally drained. It was a brutal lesson that in the music business, sometimes the biggest battles aren't on stage, but in the courtroom. Legal fights over money are common, but the next star's problem started the moment he was kicked out of the biggest metal band on earth. 6. Paul Di'Anno, the Iron Maiden voice left behind. Before Bruce Dickinson, there was Paul Di'Anno. He was the original voice of Iron Maiden, his raw, punk-infused vocals defining their first two albums. He was on the cusp of global superstardom, but his wild lifestyle and unreliable behavior got him fired from the band right as they were about to explode. The thing is, this single event sent his life into a financial tailspin from which he never truly recovered. While his former bandmates went on to become multi-millionaires playing in stadiums, Di'Anno was left to scrape by in smaller bands. What's often overlooked is that he didn't have the massive royalty checks that the other members enjoyed from the later, more successful albums. His income was a fraction of what it could have been. To make matters worse, years of hard living took a serious toll on his health, leading to major knee problems that left him unable to walk without assistance. The medical bills piled up, and without the safety net of Iron Maiden's fortune, he had to rely on donations from fans to fund his surgeries. It's a tragic tale of what might have been, and a stark look at how one bad break can cost you everything. Di'Anno lost his spot in a legendary band, but the next singer lost his entire band in a messy public divorce. 7. Jeff Tate, the ousted voice of Queensryche. For 30 years, Jeff Tate was the unmistakable voice and face of the progressive metal band Queensryche. They sold millions of albums and were known for their intelligent, conceptual music. Tate was living the dream, but what most people don't realize is that behind the scenes, tensions were boiling over. In 2012, the band had a spectacular and ugly breakup, with the other members firing Tate. This didn't just end his time with the band. It kicked off a nasty and incredibly expensive legal war over who had the right to use the Queensryche name. It's crazy to think about, but both sides were touring under the same name at the same time, confusing fans and racking up massive legal bills. The fight went on for years, a public soap opera that cost both parties millions. In the end, a settlement was reached, with Tate losing the right to the name. The lawsuit completely drained his finances, forcing him to tour relentlessly under his own name just to make ends meet. It was a bitter end to a legendary partnership, proving that creative differences can lead to financial devastation. A legal fight over a band name is brutal, but for the next frontman, the battle was with the changing times and his own choices. 8. Stephen Pearcy, the rat that hit a wall. In the heyday of the Sunset Strip, Rat was king. With massive hits and a look that defined glam metal, frontman Stephen Pearcy was the ultimate rock star. The money was flowing, and the party seemed like it would never end. But it did. The thing is, when the music scene shifted in the 90s, bands like Rat were left in the dust. The stadium tours and platinum albums disappeared almost overnight. What many have overlooked is that Pearcy's troubles were compounded by years of intense personal struggles and a lifestyle of excess that was hard to maintain without the massive income. The band went through multiple messy breakups and reunions, often leading to legal squabbles over royalties and the band's name. Pearcy launched solo projects, but they never reached the commercial heights of Rat. He found himself in a position where the cost of his lifestyle and the lingering legal issues far outweighed the money he was making. It was a classic story of a star who was unprepared for the day the music stopped. The decline of a whole genre can be tough, but what if you lose control of the very songs you wrote? That's what happened to our next artist. 9. Johnny Lane, the Cherry Pie Man's bitter end. Warrant was another giant of the glam metal era, and their mega hit Cherry Pie made frontman Johnny Lane a superstar. He wrote the songs, sang the vocals, and was the creative force behind the band. You would think that would make him rich for life. But the truth be told, the music business can be a cruel place. What most people don't realize is that in a moment of financial desperation early in his career, Lane signed a deal that gave away the publishing rights to his songs for a very small amount of money. It's a decision that haunted him for the rest of his life. Every time Cherry Pie was played on the radio, in a movie, or in a commercial, someone else was getting the lion's share of the money. He was the man who wrote the song, but he was barely getting paid for it. This, combined with the decline of his genre and his own deep personal battles, left him in a constant state of financial struggle. He tragically passed away in 2011, a cautionary tale about the importance of understanding the business behind the music. Johnny Lane lost his fortune on paper. The next rock queen lost hers in a courtroom battle that had nothing to do with music. 10. Lita Ford, the Queen of Metal's painful divorce. Lita Ford was a true trailblazer. She shredded on guitar with the Runaways and then launched a hugely successful solo career in the 80s, becoming one of the few women to dominate the metal scene. She was a certified rock icon with the money and fame to prove it. But what many have overlooked is that her empire came crashing down because of a devastatingly difficult divorce. After her music career cooled down, she stepped away from the spotlight to raise her 2 sons. When her marriage ended, it led to a brutal and prolonged legal battle. Ford has publicly stated that the process left her completely broke. She claimed she lost everything: her home, her savings, and even her guitars. It's crazy to think about, but she had to start over from scratch with nothing but her name and her talent. She had to fight her way back, releasing new music and touring again, not just for the love of it, but out of pure necessity to rebuild her life. It's a powerful story of resilience, but also a stark reminder of how personal turmoil can wipe out a professional fortune. A messy divorce is one thing, but getting kicked out of your legendary band twice is a whole other level of financial strain. 11. Dave Ellefson, the Megadeth bassist's roller coaster ride. Dave Ellefson was there from the beginning. As the co-founding bassist of Megadeth, he was a crucial part of one of the big 4 of thrash metal. For decades, he toured the world and enjoyed the financial rewards of being in a legendary band. The thing is, his journey was anything but stable. In 2002, when Dave Mustaine disbanded Megadeth due to a nerve injury, Ellefson found himself out of a job. He sued Mustaine over royalties and rights, a legal battle that cost him dearly and created a huge rift between the two. When Mustaine reformed Megadeth, Ellefson was not invited back. He had to find new ways to make a living, from other bands to working in artist relations for a gear company. He eventually rejoined the band, but his financial stability was rocked again when he was fired in 2021 after a personal scandal. Each time he was out of the band, he lost his primary source of income and had to rebuild, a financially draining process for any musician, even one from a band as big as Megadeth. Ellefson had to start over multiple times, but our next artist experienced a public breakdown so severe he claimed to be completely homeless. 12. Scott Stapp, the Creed singer's fall from grace. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Creed was arguably the biggest rock band in the world. They sold more than 50 million albums, and singer Scott Stapp was a global superstar. His net worth was estimated to be in the tens of millions. But what most people don't realize is that beneath the surface, Stapp was in the midst of a serious personal crisis. After the band broke up, his behavior became increasingly erratic. The story reached a shocking climax in 2014 when he posted a series of videos online claiming he was completely broke and living in his truck. He made wild accusations, saying his money had been stolen and his bank accounts frozen. It was a stunning and very public collapse for a man who had been at the pinnacle of the music industry just a few years earlier. The incident revealed the depth of his personal struggles, which had completely derailed his life and career, leaving him with nothing. Thankfully, Stapp eventually got the help he needed and has worked hard to rebuild his life and career. But his story remains one of the most dramatic financial falls in modern rock history. Stapp's fall was shockingly public. The next musician's downfall happened away from the cameras as he quietly faded from view. 13. Travis Meeks, the days of the new genius who vanished. Days of the New exploded onto the scene in 1997 with a sound unlike anything else. Their debut album was a massive hit, and at the center of it was a young prodigy named Travis Meeks. He was hailed as a genius, a brilliant songwriter and guitarist with a huge career ahead of him. The money started pouring in. But the thing is, Meeks couldn't handle the pressure of fame. His journey is a tragic story of a gifted artist consumed by his own personal demons. After firing his original bandmates, he struggled to replicate the success of the first album. He became known for his unpredictable behavior, and his career slowly fizzled out. What many have overlooked is the quiet financial ruin that followed. Without the big record sales and tours, the money dried up. He retreated from public life, and in the rare interviews he gave over the years, he appeared to be a shadow of his former self, his immense talent and fortune lost to years of struggle. Meeks lost his way after a massive debut, but the next Legends Broke story is actually how his legendary career began. 14. Dave Mustaine, the revenge-fueled rise from nothing. This one is a little different. Dave Mustaine is now a metal icon and the undisputed leader of Megadeth. But his story is forged in the fires of being left with absolutely nothing. In 1983, Mustaine was the lead guitarist for a little band called Metallica. He was a key songwriter and a fiery, talented musician. But his aggressive behavior and clashing personality led to him being abruptly fired. What's crazy to think about is how they did it. They put him on a bus in New York and sent him on a 4-day trip back to California with nothing but his gear and a ticket. He was broke, angry, and humiliated. On that long bus ride, fueled by a desire for revenge, he started writing lyrics on a handbill. Those lyrics would become the foundation for Megadeth. His story is about being financially destitute, but using that moment of desperation as the ultimate motivation. He built an empire from scratch, not just to be successful, but to be faster and heavier than the band that cast him out. His journey from that lonely bus ride to global stardom is one of the most legendary comeback stories in all of music. Mustaine built a career from being broke. The next musician on our list made a choice that cost him a fortune he never even had. 15. Ron McGovney, the man who walked away from millions. You've probably never heard of Ron McGovney, but he was a critical piece of heavy metal history. He was the very first bassist for Metallica. He was there in the garage with James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich when they were just kids with a dream. He played on their earliest demos and was part of the band's initial buzz. But the thing is, McGovney quickly realized the rock and roll lifestyle wasn't for him. He grew tired of the clashes within the band, particularly feeling like he was being treated more as a roadie and a source of money than a true bandmate. So, in late 1982, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. He quit. It's crazy to think about, but he walked away just months before the band would record their debut album and begin their meteoric rise to becoming the biggest metal band on the planet. He chose a normal life, becoming a mechanic, while his former bandmates went on to earn hundreds of millions of dollars. He didn't go broke from spending. He gave up a future fortune that is almost impossible to comprehend. McGovney chose to walk away, but the next artist found that even being a hired gun in a huge band doesn't guarantee a lifetime of wealth. 16. Simon Wright, the hired drummer's reality check. Simon Wright has a resume that most drummers would envy. He replaced Phil Rudd in AC/DC in the 80s, playing on multiple albums. After that, he joined the legendary Ronnie James Dio's band. He has played on some of the biggest stages in the world. You might think that a career like that means you're set for life. But the truth be told, the life of a hired gun musician is very different from being a founding member. What most people don't realize is that musicians like Wright are often paid a salary for touring and recording, rather than getting a full share of the massive profits from album sales and merchandise. While it's a good living, it's not the same as the multi-million-dollar fortunes of the band leaders. Wright has spoken about the financial realities of his career, explaining that once a tour ends, the paycheck stops. It's a constant cycle of looking for the next gig. It's a sobering look behind the curtain of the rock and roll fantasy, showing that even when you're in a legendary band, financial security is never a guarantee. The life of a hired gun can be tough, but the next singer had a solid career that hit a wall when the music world simply moved on. 17. Joe Lynn Turner, the Rainbow Singer's quiet struggle. Joe Lynn Turner had a powerful voice that landed him some of the most prestigious jobs in rock. He was the front man for Rainbow after Ronnie James Dio, and he even had a stint singing for Deep Purple. He was a rock veteran with a string of successful albums to his name. But the thing is, even for a singer with his pedigree, the music industry can be unforgiving. As musical tastes changed through the 90s and 2000s, the demand for classic hard rock singers began to fade. The big arena tours and record deals became harder to come by. What many have overlooked is the quiet financial struggle that many legacy artists like Turner have faced. He continued to tour and make music, but on a much smaller scale. He has been open in interviews about the financial hardships, the struggle to make a living in an industry that has completely transformed. It's a story that doesn't involve wild spending or lawsuits, but the simple, grinding reality of a world that has moved on, leaving a talented artist to fight for his financial survival. Turner fought to stay afloat in a changing industry. The next band's breakup didn't just end a career, it created a financial mess. 18. Vernon Reid, the colors that faded to black. In the late 80s, Living Colour was a lightning bolt. They were a band of incredibly skilled black musicians playing a fusion of heavy metal, funk, and rock that was critically acclaimed and commercially successful. Their debut album Vivid went double platinum, and they won 2 Grammy Awards. Guitarist Vernon Reid was hailed as a virtuoso. They were on a path to becoming one of the biggest bands in the world. But what most people don't realize is how quickly it all fell apart. The band broke up in 1995, right at their peak, due to internal creative conflicts. The sudden stop brought an end to the massive flow of income. Reid and the other members had to pivot and find other ways to make a living. Reid became a respected session musician and producer, but it was a world away from the stadium-level income of Living Colour. It was a classic case of a band with unlimited potential whose internal fractures not only ended their artistic journey, but also forced a complete financial reset on all of its members. A band breakup is a financial shock, but the next artist's story is about the immense cost of simply telling the truth about his own band. 19. Dave Lombardo, the Slayer drummer's battle for pennies. Dave Lombardo is a drumming god. His revolutionary playing with Slayer defined the sound of thrash metal. For years, he was part of one of the most revered and intense bands in history. You'd assume he was a very wealthy man. But the thing is, in 2013, Lombardo discovered a shocking truth. He claimed that despite the band's endless touring, he and his bandmate Jeff Hanneman were only seeing a tiny fraction of the money. He said that up to 90% of the tour income was being deducted for fees and manager commissions, leaving the actual artists with scraps. When he tried to get a look at the band's financial books and demanded a fairer contract, he was fired right before a major tour. It's crazy to think about, but one of the founding members of Slayer was let go for asking where the money was going. The ordeal exposed the often shady accounting of the music business and left Lombardo out of a job, forced to start new projects to support himself after decades of service to a legendary band. Lombardo fought for his fair share, but our final star had a different problem. He was too generous for his own good. 20. Nikki Sixx, the man who gave it all away. Nikki Sixx, the mastermind behind Motley Crue, has a story filled with incredible highs and devastating lows. During the band's peak, he was a multimillionaire who spent lavishly. But his story of being broke is different from the others. After years of struggling with a life-threatening lifestyle of excess, Six finally got clean. This newfound clarity changed his perspective on everything, including money. What's often overlooked is that in his journey of recovery, he made a conscious decision to detach from his material wealth. In his book, he talks about a period where he gave away his possessions and lived a much simpler life. Furthermore, his early contracts with the band were notoriously bad, giving him a smaller piece of the pie than you would expect for the main songwriter. He eventually renegotiated, but his path to sobriety and his earlier business deals meant his fortune wasn't always secure. His story is less about going broke from bad luck and more about a man who had to lose everything, including his attachment to money, in order to find himself and ultimately build an even bigger and more stable empire as a sober musician, author, and radio host.